Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and I want you to imagine sitting perfectly still in your car, just completely boxed into a narrow intersection.
Right. I'm your expert for today. And just picturing that is already stressing me out.
Yeah, well, hold on to that feeling, because now I want you to imagine watching a 15-ton public transit bus deliberately aim for your vehicle, eventually scraping by with, like, less than half an inch of clearance.
Half an inch. That's nothing.
Exactly. So today's deep dive is really about what happens when your daily commute stops being a journey from point A to point B and devolves into, well, active systematic warfare.
That sounds extreme, but having read the source material, it's honestly the most accurate way to describe it.
It really is. We're unpacking a highly detailed personal log today. It's a document that came to us simply titled Untitled 1.pdf.
Kitschy title, right?
Very mysterious. But it chronicles this incredibly harrowing sequence of events on the roads of Thiruvananthapuram, specifically focusing on the dense, high-traffic stretch known as the Kilimanoor corridor. And this all takes place between March 18 and March 26, 2026.
And, we usually think of driving as this system of coordination, right? Like predictable, rule-bound.
Right, you stay in your lane, I stay in mine.
Exactly. But the author of this log doesn't just describe bad traffic. They describe these roads as literal battlegrounds.
Yeah, that word really stuck out to me, battlegrounds.
Because what we are looking at in this document isn't just a collection of frustrating delays or, bad drivers. It's a chilling, real-time case study.
Documenting what the author calls calculated threats.
Yes, we're going to examine the sheer physics of displacement, the dark psychology of road intimidation, and ultimately this complete systemic safety failure where the whole social contract of driving has just evaporated.
So let's start with the apex predator of this particular ecosystem.
Or the big ones.
Yeah. The primary antagonist throughout this log is a KSRTC bus.
And for context for you listening, KSRTC is the state-run public transit system.
Yeah.
So we are talking about massive, heavy-duty government vehicles here.
Right, and you normally associate public transit with predictable, scheduled safety,
You'd hope so, yeah.
But the author's log from March 26 details this terrifying theme of spatial dominance. Rather than just moving through traffic, these massive vehicles use their sheer size to coerce the environment around them.
That concept of coercion is crucial here. The log details an incident at 16.12 near a local shop, Bismi Electronics.
Right, the first major encounter of the day.
Exactly. The bus executes an overtake by crossing solid yellow lines. Now, crossing a solid yellow is a standard traffic violation anywhere in the world.
Yeah, pretty universally illegal.
Right. But the log emphasizes the physical mechanics of what happened next. As this heavy-duty bus surged forward, it compressed multiple passenger vehicles toward the footpaths.
Basically cornering them at a junction.
Yes, effectively trapping them.
See, that's not just passing someone. That is geographic displacement.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
A vehicle of that mass creates a physical wall. When a 15-ton bus alters its trajectory, smaller cars have to yield or get crushed.
There is literally no middle ground.
None. But here's where it gets really interesting. This tactic is pushed to an absolute extreme just 2 minutes later at 16.16.
Oh, the SR Collection Silk signal.
Exactly. The author stopped at that signal. And it's a tight space where even two compact cars struggle to align side by side.
Very claustrophobic.
Right. And the author's vehicle is completely stationary. Yet, the same KSRTC bus attempts a left-side overtake on the stationary car.
Squeezing into a gap that the log describes as leaving only bread and butter clearance.
Bread and butter clearance, that phrase is so visceral.
It really is. What's fascinating here is the psychology behind it. Bread and butter meaning a microscopic sliver of space.
Like basically touching.
Exactly. Doing that to a moving car is dangerous enough.
Mm-hmm.
But executing that maneuver on a stationary vehicle in a bottleneck, that is a pure psychological play. The bus driver is actively weaponizing the mass and momentum of their vehicle.
Because they know the smaller car can't move.
Precisely. They are leveraging the inescapable fact of physics that in any collision, the smaller car loses. The bus transforms from a mode of transport into an instrument of pressure.
It reminds me of a very specific type of high school bully in a crowded hallway.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Right, like they don't just walk past you to get to class. They walk directly at you, dropping their shoulder, using their sheer physical mass to communicate a clear, unspoken threat.
Move out of my way, or take the hit.
Exactly. They are asserting dominance over the shared space. And when you apply that high school hallway logic to multi-ton vehicles,
It becomes lethal.
yeah, you start creating scenarios where the margin of error just completely ceases to exist.
Which brings us to the inevitable escalation of this behavior. The log captures an incident that occurred on a steep, two-way stretch of the Peta flyover,
This was on March 19, right?
right, March 19. And this involved a different state bus, a KSRTC Swift. So the flyover is divided by a solid white line, and traffic is super dense.
Okay.
The bus attempts a parallel overtake, straddling the center line, and then suddenly angles 10 degrees directly toward the author's front right bonnet.
A 10-degree angle might not sound like much on paper, but let's think about the physics of that for a second.
Terrifying.
A bus turning 10 degrees toward you on a steep incline means its center of gravity is effectively looming over your vehicle.
Yeah, it's tilting.
This visual wall of metal is basically closing off your only escape vector.
The author actually notes the bus acted as a moving barricade.
A moving barricade, wow.
Yeah. To avoid being crushed by that 10-degree closure, the author had to hug the curb within half an inch and hit the brakes hard.
And when a car is forced against a curb on a steep incline, you risk immediate traction loss, blown tires, or even a rollover.
Exactly. The bus driver is forcing the smaller vehicle to absorb all the kinetic risk of the maneuver.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Because I hear these details. A bus compressing lanes, hugging a curb on a flyover, tight clearances at a signal.
Sure.
I have to play devil's advocate here. Anyone who has driven in a major congested city, whether it's New York, Mumbai, London, has seen buses throw their weight around to merge back into traffic.
Screw. Yeah.
So isn't this just standard, impatient, big city driving? Are we overanalyzing a public transit driver who is just, desperately behind schedule and fighting through gridlock?
Well, it's entirely natural to want to categorize this as typical urban impatience because the alternative implies the system is actively malicious.
Right, which is a scary thought.
Impatience is when a driver cuts you off because they aren't paying attention or they're rushing for a gap. But if we look at the behavioral pattern documented in this log, that impatience explanation completely falls apart. Let's look at the climax of the encounters with that KSRTC Superfast Premium bus on March 26. At 16.40 at the Kilimanoor traffic signal junction, the bus executes high-speed cornering and aggressive wheel positioning, again forcing displacement toward the curb.
Wait, so that's the 16.114 compression,
Sure.
the 16.16 stationary squeeze,
Uh-huh.
the booster chai incident we briefly mentioned at 16.27, where the bus pins the car with its left front wheel,
Yes.
and now this high-speed cornering at 16.40.
Mhm.
That is 4 highly aggressive spatial violations by the same massive vehicle in under 30 minutes.
Exactly. The source material explicitly rejects the idea of impulsivity or simple rushing. It labels this systematic intimidation.
Systematic intimidation.
Impatience leaves a margin for correction. Systematic intimidation repeatedly strips another driver of their reaction time.
Wow.
The log points out something profound here. When clearances drop to half an inch at speed, human biology cannot process the visual data fast enough to react.
You literally can't move your foot to the brake fast enough.
Right. At that distance, as the author writes, physics ceases to forgive, and there is no reaction time, only luck.
That is a terrifying distinction. Impatience means they are ignoring you. Intimidation means they are targeting you.
Precisely.
The environment relies entirely on the smaller vehicle miraculously avoiding the larger one, rather than both vehicles navigating the space safely.
It's purely survival mode.
But here's where the deep dive gets really unnerving. We've established how massive vehicles dominate through sheer size and kinetic threat.
Right. The apex predators.
Yeah, but the source material reveals that the road ecosystem in this corridor is also severely compromised by highly agile, coordinated threats.
The swarm.
Exactly. You don't just have to worry about the heavy apex predators, you have to worry about the swarm.
These threats scale down in physical size, but they multiply in tactical complexity.
I like that phrasing. Tactical complexity.
Because the massive buses operate on blunt force, right? But the smaller vehicles operate on predatory synchronization.
Let's pivot to an event the author calls the dual auto ambush.
Sounds like a movie title.
It really does. This happened at 13.15 on that same chaotic day, March 26. The author's vehicle is completely stationary in traffic. And out of nowhere, 2 auto rickshaws execute a synchronized disruption.
And for those unfamiliar, auto rickshaws are small, three-wheeled vehicles that are incredibly nimble.
Yeah, they can practically turn on a dime.
Exactly, making their movements highly unpredictable. And in an unregulated or, highly stressed transit market, drivers of nimble vehicles often develop swarm behaviors to navigate gridlock.
Exploiting gaps that larger cars just can't fit into.
Exactly.
So in this ambush, one auto approaches from the left and initiates an inverted S-style U-turn, cutting directly across the author's front bumper.
Which forces a reaction.
Right. Naturally, the human instinct is to maneuver your steering wheel away from the sudden obstacle to avoid a collision.
Right, you pull to the right.
But as the author evades, a second auto, which had been waiting roughly one electric pole away, intercepts from the opposite side.
Oh, wow.
Sliding right into the author's new escape trajectory.
Yeah. It is a textbook tactical trap.
It really is. It's a classic pincer movement, like pack hunters in nature.
Yeah, the wolves circling the prey.
Exactly. The first vehicle acts as a diversion. It forces you to commit your attention and your vehicle's momentum to the right, which intentionally opens up a blind spot on your left.
And the second vehicle then occupies your only escape road.
The log notes that this didn't feel like random traffic chaos. It felt like a practiced, coordinated strike designed to stall the larger vehicle and seize its road space.
The tactical nature of it is what makes it so dangerous. And the source adds a critical layer to this encounter. Neither of these auto rickshaw drivers wore a uniform.
Which is a bigger deal than it sounds, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In a functioning transit system, commercial drivers have identifying markers, a badge, a company uniform, a visible medallion.
Something to hold them accountable.
Right. The absence of uniforms means these drivers are operating with complete anonymity. There is no central authority to report them to, making them entirely untraceable.
So, you survive the kinetic gauntlet of moving barricades and synchronized pincer movements, and you finally arrive at your destination and park your car.
You'd think you could finally exhale.
Right, you'd think the threat is over. But the vulnerability doesn't even end when you remove your vehicle from the flow of traffic.
The static threats.
Yeah. The log flashes back to an incident on March 18th in Pathum. The author parks their car, walks away, and when they return, they find the rear right wheel cover, the hubcap, has been stolen.
Now, I know it seems like a minor property crime compared to a 15-ton bus nearly crushing you against a flyover.
Yeah, a stolen hubcap isn't life-threatening.
Right, but psychologically, it is the final piece of the puzzle. It shifts the threat from kinetic to static.
I'm really glad you brought up the psychology of that, because that is exactly what makes this detail so demoralizing.
It's exhausting.
When you are driving, your adrenaline is pumping, you are actively defending your space, but when you park, you are supposed to be safe.
You let your guard down.
Finding your car cannibalized for parts while parked proves that the ecosystem is hostile 24/7. The environment extracts a toll whether you are moving or standing completely still.
If we pull back and look at the aggregate of this log, the heavy buses weaponizing their mass, the untraceable autos executing coordinated ambushes, the opportunistic theft of a parked vehicle,
It's a lot.
it all points to a singular, undeniable truth about the Kilimanoor corridor. The road has completely lost its predictable, rule-bound nature.
Yeah.
Whether you're dealing with a vehicle 10 times your size or half your size, you are existing in a space defined by total vulnerability.
So what does this all mean for the broader system?
That's a million-dollar question.
The author of Untitled 1.pdf distills these 8 days of terror into a few chilling core takeaways. They conclude that the system currently values aggression over adherence.
Which is terrifying.
It rewards dominance over discipline, and it prioritizes speed over safety.
Yeah.
But the most alarming part is that the author refuses to categorize these encounters as mere near misses.
And that's a really important distinction because human nature makes us want to brush off a near miss. Right.
Absolutely. We slam on the brakes, our heart pounds.
We take a breath, we say, wow, that was close, and then we forget about it by the time we get home.
Exactly.
But the source argues vehemently against that mindset. These are not isolated close calls. The author defines them as predictors of inevitable accidents.
Because if the margin of error is consistently reduced to half an inch, it is a mathematical certainty that eventually the dice will roll against you.
Precisely. The author provides a powerful concluding diagnostic of the Kilimanoor corridor. They state the environment is operating under high kinetic stress with minimal compliance buffering.
That sounds very academic. Let's break that down.
Sure. Essentially, you have an enormous amount of moving, heavy energy, the massive buses, the dense traffic interacting in incredibly tight spaces. That is the kinetic stress.
Okay, got it. What about compliance buffering?
Compliance buffering is the safety cushion that exists when people actually adhere to the social contract of driving.
So like leaving a 2-second following distance.
Exactly. Yielding at a crosswalk. Staying on your side of the solid yellow line.
And when you erase those rules, when compliance drops to minimal or zero, you basically remove the buffer.
Remove the buffer entirely. High-energy heavy vehicles operating with zero safety cushion is a textbook definition of systemic safety failure.
A recipe for disaster.
The author concludes that this specific environment is statistically trending toward high-impact collisions. And when those collisions happen, the victims will inevitably be the smaller passenger vehicles that were forced to absorb the kinetic risk.
Think about your own daily commute for a second. We all participate in shared public systems every single day.
We have to.
When you pull up to an intersection, you rely entirely on the implicit trust that the driver next to you will stop when the light turns red.
Right.
You trust that the multi-ton truck beside you doesn't want to crash any more than you do. But this log is a stark look at what happens when accountability vanishes from that shared space.
When accountability evaporates, the environment dictates the behavior.
Yeah.
If a corridor consistently rewards the drivers who are the most aggressive and the most dominant, then the social contract dissolves. Every single commuter who tries to play by the rules is reduced to a potential target.
You stop being a driver participating in traffic and you become prey navigating a gauntlet. You are running on chance rather than control.
It really is a profound and terrifying shift in how we understand our movement through our own cities.
It is. So let's quickly trace the arc of the journey we've taken through this document today.
Right, yeah.
We started by examining the terrifying concept of spatial dominance, watching how the massive KSRTC public transit buses weaponize their weight to displace smaller cars.
Crossing solid yellow lines.
Yeah, and forcing those bread and butter clearances.
We then explored how that coercion escalates into systematic intimidation, deliberately stripping drivers of their reaction time till they are trapped against moving barricades.
With margins of less than half an inch.
Right, relying purely on luck to survive.
And then, from the heavy apex predators, we pivoted to the highly agile swarm threats.
The coordinated, untraceable auto rickshaws.
Executing those tactical pincer movements to trap passenger cars. And finally, we looked at how that vulnerability extends even to a parked stationary vehicle, proving that the ecosystem remains hostile even outside the kinetic flow of traffic.
Nowhere is safe.
Right. It is a vivid, disturbing picture of a system under severe strain. Shared roads must remain ecosystems of coordination. When they devolve into arenas for mechanical dominance, the system inevitably collapses into tragedy.
You know, as we wrap up this analysis, there's one final, larger question this source material raises. Something for you to mull over long after you finish listening.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
We are currently living in an era that is rapidly pushing toward the integration of artificial intelligence and self-driving cars.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Everywhere you look.
Tech companies promise us a future of autonomous vehicles that will navigate our urban centers safely and efficiently. But think about the reality of the Kilimanoor corridor we just analyzed. How could a rigid, rule-abiding, logic-based autonomous vehicle ever navigate a corridor defined by high kinetic stress and systematic intimidation?
That is a fascinating thought experiment, because an algorithm is fundamentally programmed to expect compliance.
Exactly.
It assumes the solid yellow line is a physical boundary that won't be crossed.
It does. If human survival on these specific roads relies entirely on luck, on reading unspoken aggressive threats, on anticipating that a public transit bus is about to become a moving barricade on a steep flyover,
A machine might find itself entirely paralyzed.
the self-driving car cannot feel intimidation. It wouldn't know how to yield to a bully executing a pincer movement because those maneuvers violate the programmed logic of the road.
It might just stop completely.
Right. Unable to process an environment where the rules are dead and physics ceases to forgive.
Wow. It really makes you appreciate the incredibly complex, intuitive, and sometimes terrifying calculations our human brains are forced to make every single time we get behind the wheel.
We do it without even thinking about it sometimes.
We are constantly negotiating that silent agreement, even when the vehicle next to us is actively tearing it up.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the chaotic, high-stakes realities of the modern road. We hope it gave you a new lens through which to view your next commute. Stay safe out there, keep your eyes on the road, and we warmly invite you to join our next exploration.